When chemotherapy is prepared, as you can see, there are trace amounts of chemotherapy that are on the bag. There is no chemotherapy on the nurse's gloves, and there's no chemotherapy traces on the pump or the patient. Here's Carly putting on a single pair of gloves to hang her chemo. She picks up the bag of chemo, places it on the IV pole, and goes to connect it to the patient. She completed her 2-person RN check prior to coming into the room. She starts the scanning process. She forgot the scanner to scan the pump, so she goes back and grabs the scanner. Carly wore single gloves to hang this chemo, and this is all of the chemo that is on the gloves that she wore. When she takes the gloves off, we notice that there is chemo on the cuff of her gown. On the back of her hand, we also notice that there are some trace spots of chemo on her actual skin, as well as the cuff of the gown. Now we'll see that there are traces of chemo all over the tubing, on the pump, and on the tubing that leads to the patient. Not surprisingly, there is also chemo on the scanner, the mouse, and the keyboard. Now we see Carly putting on a second pair of gloves before she hangs her chemo. Notice that the second pair of gloves goes over the cuff of the gown, while the first pair of gloves is under the cuff of the gown. Laura is in the room to help Carly hang her bag of chemo. She's the one who scans the patient, scans the chemo, scans the pump, and then goes back to the MAR. They identify the patient using different identifiers, and then they confirm the chemo with the MAR. Now Carly hangs her chemo on the IV pole. She attaches it to her patient. She uses one of her fingers to open the channel on the Alaris pump and places the tubing in the channel. Carly takes off her outer gloves, closes the chamber of the pump, talks to Laura to make sure that interoperability is working. They confirm the settings on the pump, and Carly starts the chemo. These are Carly's outer gloves with chemo on them before she removed them. These are her inner gloves. You can see there's no chemo on them and no chemo on the cuff of her gown. This is the bag of chemo with traces of chemo on it. But using double gloves, there was no chemo noted on the pump and no chemo on the scanner or computer because Carly never touched them.